Jeff Hamilton, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man, this is so amazing. I too consider you and I were talking off screen a little bit, even though I'm a senior pastor right now. I'm one of those guys who says that I was demoted to senior pastor from youth pastor. I'm with kids every day. One of the advantages of kind of our church environments is the other things that the God allows you to do. And like how you're on this podcast, right? Doing the podcast, writing
Yep.
curriculum, equipping other youth pastors. Well, even pastoring my church, they allow me, I spend every afternoon on the field coaching high school athletics. I'm finishing up my seventh baseball season, varsity baseball. I just finished my ninth varsity basketball season, my fifth varsity football season. So my wife likes it when I have appointments because she likes to see me in something other than a hat and t-shirt and shorts,
Yeah,
you know. So
yeah. I understand, and it's good that you said that because I like senior pastors who actually spend time with their students. Needless to say, I've served a few youth pastors that barely knew we had a youth group, barely knew we had students. I don't think, and so I will ask you then, as the senior pastor, if I dropped you in, say you're a volunteer, you drop you in, the youth pastor's not there yet, you get dropped into a room full of middle school students. Youth pastor's late, the guy that's going to be teaching's late. How do you entertain or engage or keep these students busy for the next, say, 15, 20 minutes until help arrives?
I am the help. I'm the guy that they would pray would be there, right?
That's
I
right.
am if I have enough space, I'm the king of blob tag.
Mm.
One of my other favorite ones is depending on how large the group is. I like uh, shoe scavenger hunt, where you make everybody take off their shoes, throw them in one big pile, and then you got to find the person's shoes behind you. Go dive into the pile and find that one. But bro, I've been a youth pastor since 1988. So I am the king of Simon Says. And I
Ooh,
can play Simon Says and
ooh,
keep the crowd engaged for
yeah.
as long as we need to.
That's right. I have, and I don't know where I read it. I may have read it somewhere, but I call it Simon Says on a can of Red Bull, and it goes really fast,
Yeah,
and you gotta follow along. And so if you're not
exactly
following
right.
along, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Well, let's talk about Dad Academy. Tell me about Dad
Yeah.
Academy. How did it get started, and why was it important enough to expand past the small group? You tell me earlier that it really started as a small group. So tell me about the kind of the genesis of all that.
Well, it really started from being a youth pastor, right? You got to see some families that were doing some things well,
Mhm.
and you encountered families that were not doing things very well. And it's crazy that they would come and ask somebody because you connect with their kids,
Yep.
like they would ask you for advice. And so it was kind of odd becoming a parenting expert before I actually had any kids. But when we moved back to California, where I reside now, to plant a church, I went to work like many church planters do at some coffee shop, right? It's the best place to meet people in the community. And in the early 2000s, there was really only one coffee shop, right? You worked for this national chain. And so I applied to be a manager. And so I'm thinking, how hard is coffee? Well, they made me go to school for 40 hours to learn all about coffee and do all this kind of stuff before I was qualified to press the automatic brew button on the machine that measures everything for you, right?
Right.
Yet on March 1st, 1996, they just handed me a baby, right? And uh, thankfully, I had a good model. My wife and I had a good model and our parents of what to do. But then I started, my advanced degrees are really in strategic organizational leadership. And I would go in, I would consult businesses or churches on culture and practices and help them develop a plan to be able to meet their goals because most of it was not it was missional alignment really. And I started thinking like the only thing a man does in his life without a plan is to be a dad. And so I came up with this idea that maybe I could help dads be confident and know how think men are most successful when they know what's expected of them and they have a plan to accomplish it. And so what I did was I just took some of the practices that I would use in consulting businesses and consulting organizations, training leaders, and I just put it into a plan to specifically help equip dads to discover the dad that God has made them to be. And so I also think that men need community. It's awful when you have a pastor like on the podcast because they never take a breath. Um, so interrupt anytime you want, Paul.
No,
But
I'm listening, man.
like one of the things that also that we see in our culture today is like people don't think about this, but suicide is the number two killer of men in my area between the ages of 40 and 65
Mm.
because they lose a sense of purpose and they feel that they're living in isolation. And the model of discipleship that Jesus gave to us is about doing life together. And so how do we get guys talking about the most important thing that they ever get to be, which is a dad, and learn how to share some life together? So that's why it came out originally as like an online video small group curriculum. The problem is that 20 30 plus years working with families, 30 plus years of of mentoring parents, raising successful young adults. I have a son who's 29, married, doing great. My daughter is 26. She's living in Brooklyn and pursuing her dreams. I have healthy family, and like I'm not an expert until I write a book. So we took all this material and we just made it into a book. In fact, get a little preview of it right here. It comes out
Hey, there it is. That's right.
May 27th. Got the first little proof in my hands, and yeah, I didn't want to do the book really because guys, they we need something to do together, but it would be I'd much rather have a dad have something in his hands that would prompt his idea to start thinking about who God's made him to be and to start thinking about what he needs to do in his partnership with God in helping cultivate this gift that God has given to him and his children.
Right. And for those that are listening, Jeff Jones held up his book. Those who are watching on YouTube, you know what he just did. It's Dad Academy, Raising Courageous, Capable, Confident Kids. So that's the book he held up, and there'll be a link down below. By the way, would encourage you to get pre-orders of the book since he says it's coming out May 27th.
May
3 days.
27th.
That's right, 3 days after my birthday, and so you will go ahead and the link will be down there. Go ahead and pre-order it because let me tell you, as I was telling Jeff earlier. Unlike maybe a lot of podcasts, I actually read the source material. I actually read the book. And so it's a good book. Let me tell you something. It is a great book for dads of all kinds. Whatever kind of dad you are, and you feel like you're lacking in some way, this book will fill in those gaps, I believe. And so I think if you'll take a look at the book, you'll be surprised at what you'll learn, even as I'm reading, because I grew up. Listen, a couple of things. Number one, you said your daughter lives in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn, so shout out to Brooklyn. That's right. I grew up on Flatbush Avenue, so shout out to Brooklyn there.
She's in Bed-Stuy.
Oh well, God bless her. I'll pray for her, for sure, for sure, for sure. But obviously, you can't write a book about, and I read in there about these various stories and these various. And by the way, the book has lots of things in it. It's got great testimonies from guys in the book. It has questions at the end, things that you can actually work through that will actually help you discover your values, build your culture in your family, all of those things. But tell us a bit about you tell some stories about you and your dad and what your dad kind of fed into you. How did that impact the whole journey you've had about being a dad?
Well, that's the advantage that I had over what a lot of men experience. I had a dad that even though he was very busy in his career, he too was a pastor. So I grew up with as a pastor's kid and needed minimal therapy.
Minimal.
No, just kidding, right? It was actually the greatest gift that we had because the one thing that I really learned from my mom and dad is what faith really looks like. It was not something that just took place on a platform. It was kind of the Deuteronomy principle where we were talking about the issues, how God is integrated into our lives all the time. In fact, that's looking back, I would probably say I learned about integrity from my dad, from my parents. And I define integrity differently. A lot of times we define integrity as like a quality of character, right? I am what I say that I do what I say that I do, I commit to. My word is true. A man's word is his bond. All those things. And while those are noble qualities, to me, that same definition doesn't apply when I say that a building has integrity, right? A building has integrity. It means that it's strong. It means that it's tied together. The reason why it's able to sustain is because it is integrated, right? And so when I say that we need to raise, that I learned integrity from my parents, I learned how Jesus is integrated, like it says in Colossians, into everything. He is all and is in all. And so I saw that kind of growing up. And even though, like every maybe teenager, especially those who grew up in the pastor's home, well, I wasn't outwardly rebellious. I was a kid of the 80s in Southern California. Um, and I had to come to my own conclusion about who Jesus is to me. And I was grateful that my parents let me on that journey and they continued to model that out for me. And so as my kids began to develop, I wanted them to have a real faith as well, because there are growing up in a pastor's home expectations and assumptions that are made. And they both have emerged into young adulthood, not young adulthood. My son's 29 and married. My daughter's just turned 27. They're pursuing God, and faith is integral into who they are. It's the filter through which they view the world. And so I believe that I really took those things away from my family, and I saw in the families that were doing it well, in the families that weren't doing it well, and in the family that my wife and I wanted to raise, that integration piece of making Jesus and the journey of following him real in everyday situations, not just Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights at youth group, but that we know what it is to follow Jesus and have him integrated into every part of our life. And that was probably the greatest benefit that I took away from getting to grow up with the amazing parents that I did. And my wife had a very similar advantage. And that's not true, right? Because today's statistics say 40% of people grow up without a dad in their home. Even more so, the statistics are crazy. Men specifically, 50% of men grow up without a dad at home. So that's one of the other reasons for Dad Academy is how do you know what to do when you haven't had a model? And I had that benefit.
Yeah. And let me tell you something. The book takes on a different tone for me because I grew up without a father. My dad passed when I was about 8 years old.
Mm,
Uh, toughest Marine you'd ever want to meet. And grew up in Brooklyn. He worked on the old Howard Johnson's air conditioner. He's an air conditioner repairman. And this next line of the book is what really maybe dial in a little bit. It says, you say in the book that dad is destiny. Dad is
yeah.
destiny. Now, my dad obviously was not there for me, which is in this case, youth pastors became those dad figures for me.
Yes.
So to say dad is destiny in that regard is true for me, is true on all kinds of levels for that. But go ahead and just expound on that on dad is destiny.
If I can go back to tie into your own journey, it's one of the reasons why I still am a coach. It's one of the reasons why, as a pastor, why it's important for me to engage and to kind of step in and kind of fill those gaps, because there's all types of statistics. Any listener who wants to go on an interesting search, all you have to do is type in statistics about fatherlessness, and it talks about the impact that growing up with uh, growing up with a dad gives you a scholastic advantage, an academic advantage. It gives you an emotional intelligence advantage. It gives you a risk-taking advantage. Um, if you are a young woman, uh, it affects your self-esteem and your sense of self-worth, which, especially when we have all these things in today's culture that compete against those things. And so having a dad has a huge advantage. Uh, Recently in our culture, we've had a talk probably going since the pandemic about this idea of privilege, right? You hear the greatest privilege in America is not being Anglo or is not being college educated. The biggest, the biggest privilege that gives you a leg up in the US and around the world is having a dad.
Yeah.
And so, dads, we are not just placeholders. We are not just providers, and we're not just like trying to make sure everybody has what they need. Our presence, very presence in the lives of our children and in the lives of our community changes the opportunity for their success and their advantage in life. And so, if we can get men to believe in the possibilities of the purpose that God's placed in their life, we can actually start to see not just our homes, but our whole communities begin to be turned around by men who begin to take fathering seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and and I could see that once again as part of my own life. The advantage that other kids had by having a dad in their life. I'm playing, and it's true too. Even as you get older, you still feel like you're playing catch up in some way
Mm,
as you get older, and so it's that is a super important thing. Is dads are the greatest privilege, like you said. Now, you in the book, you also talk about how important it is for a dad to define mission as a dad.
yeah.
Why is that so important that a dad figure out what the mission is?
Well, I think so mission is what we're to do, and purpose is how we're to do it, right? And so I think if a guy, going back to the idea, if a guy understands what's expected of him and has a plan to fulfill it, he feels like he can be successful. But most guys don't understand, like, what's really my job as a dad? We tend to think it's the provider, and sometimes we take on the role of discipline, and boundary setter in our home, maybe cheerleader if we're a real exceptional dad and going to games and stuff like this. But really, your job is to prepare, your mission is to prepare your kids for life with skills and values. A dad's mission is to pass on his skills, whatever he knows how to do, he better make sure that his kids know how to do it.
Yeah.
And whatever they don't know how to do, they need to find somebody who can teach them how to do what they don't know how to do and to pass on their values to their kids. And
Yeah.
values are not what you want to be. Values are actually what you how you live every single day. For example, if I can use a biblical example, Jesus said to his disciples, well, he's trying to train them on a whole different way of life and way of thinking. He says, whoever wants to be great among you must become a servant. And in a later situation, he modeled that for them by taking the position of a house servant and washing their feet. And
Yeah.
it became some big ordeal. And one guy wants an entire bath, and Jesus is like, "Come on, well, that's we're not going there." Um, he says, "But if you don't let me do this, right, you don't have a part of me." Now, that must have happened and been a very powerful moment in that moment. But think about this, that well, for the rest of their lives, they're going into people's houses, and what was sitting at the door? A basin and a towel.
Yep.
That there's a practical reminder that says, hey, if you're going to follow me, the towel and the basin is where it's at.
That's right. That's right. And you
Washing people,
no, go
washing
ahead.
people's feet and serving. And so that's what values really are. In fact, I even gave an example in the book, exposing myself a little bit of a value that I wish wasn't the case, as I had found myself, I leave. I was saying about this to my men's Bible study this morning. The fact that I leave my coffee cup and my drinking cups all over the house, even after my wife ask me to pick it up, it doesn't seem like that's a major issue, a major inconvenience until I start to believe, until I start to examine the belief that's behind that behavior.
Yeah.
And the belief that's behind that behavior is I can do things when I want to so that I'm not inconvenienced, even if it causes tension and inconvenience to others. So then this desire that I have of really wanting to serve my family and really wanting to promote them and what's important to me, the thing that I actually model is the thing that's important to me.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yep.
I have to be able to shift that. And I don't want that value passed on to my kids. Right. So I want to adjust my life in such a way that the core of my belief system, how I relate to others, what's important in life and how that gets lived out is important because that's what your kids will take on, right? Because how many kids learn that one of their values that got passed on to them was I can never make my dad happy.
Yeah.
How many adult men are still trying to prove something to someone because what the value that was communicated to them was that you're not enough.
Yeah.
So our values are based in our behavior. So if we're clear on that, I got to pass on my skills and the right values to my kids, then they can be successful in life because my purpose is that I want them to be successful.
Right. And I think you answered my next question because my next question was, do you see guys struggling to establish or understand what their values are? And why do you see men struggling to do this? And I think you answered that pretty clearly is that there's a lot of young men who weren't able to, who didn't get it from their fathers, and who then the value they learned was I can never please my dad. It's never
Yeah.
enough.
Well, I think sometimes we even have to go a little bit deeper, Paul. For example, I had a guy in one of our Dad Academy groups. He was a grandpa, and he was actually in it with his two son-in-laws, and they were wanting to think about our extended family culture. And I said, "What's your dream for your life?" And he goes, he's been very successful in his career. He says, I want to leave each of my daughter's families, my son-in-law, I want to leave their families each $1 million." And I looked at him in the eye and I said, "Why on earth would you ever want to do that?" Because you and I both know that you only appreciate or you only value what you've worked for. Why would you want to take away from them all of the learning experiences and all of the opportunities that come with just grinding, with just suffering, with just persevering, right? With having to trust God for his provision. Because do you believe that God's the provider or that you're the provider? And all of a sudden it was like, oh, I don't wait. I was like, holy cow, I wish my dad would have left me $1 million. It sure would have made things a lot easier, right? But I'm getting down to the principle behind this, right?
Right.
And I asked him, why do you really want to do this? He goes, to be honest, like I want them to be able to do whatever God asks them to do without having to think about the financial impact it would have on their life. I said, that is a radically different value than financial security. Radical generosity and radical obedience is an incredible value to pass on more than creating financial security. Now, all of a sudden, the light bulb went off on him, right? He's trying to think, how can I keep investing into the people that are important in my life so that I can empower them to do what God's asked them to do? That's a radical different way of thinking than just hoping that my kids don't have to go through financial challenges.
Yeah.
And when you help guys dig down, we usually get to there's an old saying from the late 80s, early 90s about men's issues. It said, when you help guys get down to their gold, you got to mine through some stuff. But when you get to the gold, whoo, is it valuable?
Yeah.
And that's why one of the biggest exercises is trying to discover your values. Because if you don't know who you are and if you don't know what's important to you, you don't know who you are.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. In the book, you also talk about the three C's dads are responsible to develop in their kids. What are those three?
Three C's are that they would live life with courage, that they would live life with competence, right? There's our skill piece, and that they would live life with confidence. I think the goal of every dad is, you want your kids to be confident, to have a good self-image, not to be prideful or arrogant, but just to be secure in their identity. But the question is, we don't know how to cultivate those things in our kids. And so those sound great, right? Makes for great preaching, the three C's of
Yes.
parenting. But how do we cultivate those things? One of the things I quote in the book is from Bethany Hamilton. Um, it talks about uh, courage isn't not being afraid. It's just not letting fear stop you.
Right.
And so courage. Do you want me to unpack these a little bit, or should I take
Sure.
a
No,
breath and let you interject?
if no, you keep going, but I want to stop a good roll here.
The word courage comes from the Latin word cor, right? Which COR in Latin, but for us, CORE. So it's how do we get down to the core? I really say living with courage, teaching our kids how to live with courage is teaching them how to live from the heart,
Yeah.
right? And it is the way in which courage is how you address risk. How do I evaluate risk? Because you don't get anywhere in life without taking chances, without taking risks. So I say that courage is how faith responds to risk. And what has to happen is you cultivate in your kids the ability to evaluate and to measure risk and to be able to not be afraid of taking chances or opportunities that presented to them just because it might be challenging or they might be unsure. If they can be sure about the information, if they can trust themselves because they've experienced little victories, right? Courage is the story of David. What makes you think you can get Goliath? Well, I already did a bear and I already did a lion, and that probably started with a rabbit. I've built up these victories that makes me think that I can do this even when something else says that I can't. And that leads us into confidence. I mean, into competence. We want them to be able to have skills, right? So whatever we don't think that everything you know how to do, somebody taught you, from like tying our shoelaces, making our bed, right? Like think about this. One of the best-selling books recently was just about like make your bed,
Yep.
which talks about how you got to find little ways to be successful in life. And so when that happens, you have to be able to pass on the skills that you have to your kids. Like people don't think like, it's any big deal to run a skill saw or to mow the lawn. Uh, One of the things that I passed on to my son was, I mean, you see our little yard back here in Southern California, it's norm for somebody to have somebody come and cut your grass and to do all that kind of stuff. Not us. We had Hamilton and Son Landscaping, and the primary laborer was my son. And it didn't really have to do with just learning how to cut grass in a straight run. It had to do with like, so when things went wrong with the lawnmower, how do we problem solve? How do we fix it? How do we, like all of these opportunities, not just teach you one skill, but multiple skills. And
Right.
when they have a knowledge base behind them, but not only like practical skills, but relational skills, right? You have to teach people to say please. You have to teach them to say thankful, to thank you. Our default is to think about ourselves first. And so when we do all those kind of things, then you feel equipped for life. And when you're facing new and challenging situations, you have a knowledge base that you can build on in order to be successful. And so courage, competence, and the last one is confidence. And confidence comes from knowing who you are and a healthy self-image or a healthy God image. And one of the ways that helps us do that is by through the routines and rituals and traditions of our family. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that dad really underestimates is the importance of being the memory maker, right? When you start to think about the good experiences that you had growing up or different things, you think about the people who are involved more than you do the event itself. The activity was a trigger for the memory. And so dad, our job is to help create those sense of memories that
Yep.
give them a confidence to be able to move forward, knowing that they are secure in who they are and that they have people around them who love them and support them and will continue to cheer them on. I think that's underrated in the importance of being a dad. And the rituals and traditions, like again, a ritual of when you combine competence and ritual, making your bed. Well, again, we have a whole best-selling book that says if you'll make your bed every day, then you start off the day with one thing already off your checklist. So now
That's
you're
right.
giving a kid both a life skill, but also like this is what we do. I'm gonna get on to things that need to be done early on, and that shapes your character. And I think that those three things, courage, competence, and confidence, is what gives our kids develops character in them.
And you give great examples, by the way. In the book, there's a great chapter on ritual, on ceremony, on
Yeah,
passages. Great section on that. Youth pastors, it's worth it. It's worth it for you just to get it because you could draw from that because youth ministries need that as well. We need rituals. We need ceremonies. We need those things as well, especially as a family. Like for us, game nights, board game
right.
nights for our family, epic, epic, epic nights of what do I want to say? It's a card game. What am I thinking about?
Catan.
Phase
Oh,
10.
phase 10. Oh, yeah.
Epic nights of Phase 10. We can go back and we can regale the the various things that happened around the table. And so for us, that's an important ritual that
Right. Right.
anytime they come in, we decide, well, what are we going to play tonight? Are we going to play a different kind of board game? Are we going to play Phase 10? Are we going to, whatever it is. Sometimes it's the train game. Sometimes it's whatever it is.
Right.
Those to me, those are traditional times of family times as we're probably going to play a game. That's part of our
Right.
tradition. When we gather, we play.
Well, we play crazy Uno, right? A variation of Uno.
Mhm.
And
Right.
whoever wins gets to sign the card with the date. So now our whole Uno deck is signed with all of these different, right? So when we're playing Uno, we're actually looking at like, oh, remember when you won? Or remember when that, right? It's a thing. But I love what you talked about with youth ministry, right? So if I can share a youth ministry secret to like, how
Please,
do you help
please.
kids know when they go from one stage to another? For your listeners, I do have at the Dad Academy, if you're a parent or something like this, it might be a good resource for youth pastors. I call it milestone moments. It's a rites of passage planner that you can
Yep.
actually download and buy. But one of the things I used to do as a youth pastor is I took my boys every summer. I took the boys who were going to be seniors and the boys who had just graduated along with their small group leaders. So we would have a group of you know 20 or 30 men, maybe 40, and we'd go away for a 2-night rafting trip. And we would do this because rafting, one, that we'd have to like make all the meals and do all that kind of stuff and sit around the campfire and just make space. But it was a great illustration to talk about how life is lived, right? The most exciting place is the scariest place, right? The hardest work is when you're on the sides, out, not staying in the current and not being pushed. And then on the last night, the boys who were seniors and their leaders would pray and invest and speak a word into the guys who are juniors because we were shaping them to be the next leaders of the group. And it was amazing rite of passage and how the boys came into their senior year with a new sense of kind of confidence and things like this, and the boys who were seniors graduated like feeling like I finished well. Like these kind of things shape your
That's
sense of
right.
identity,
That's right.
and
That's
to
right.
develop those kind of things within our family is even more important. Don't Since I'm speaking to a largely Christian audience, remember God shaped a people not by DNA but through rituals and traditions,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Passover, Sukkot or tabernacles, through Yom Kippur, all of the come to Jerusalem 3 times a year. Tell the story of the Exodus over and over and over and over. That's what gave God's people this sense of identity. And now we tell the story of Christ's death and resurrection. And it's the thing that unites us, that reminds us of who we are. The power of rituals and tradition to
Yep.
shape your culture and to give you a sense of identity is something that is so important in any organization, and especially family culture.
Yeah, and with graduation coming up, I do want to encourage youth pastors, by the way. Something I do is I tried to do graduation where it was super meaningful. It's my last
Yeah,
time for many of them to speak into their lives. And so when you give them something like a gift, and I don't, Bibles are fine. You can give away a Bible.
sure.
But a lot of times what I give away is I'll give away a baton. I'll say, this is
Mm,
your next journey. This is
love it.
your next place, right? Find something that you can impart to these students that they're going away. How do they remember their time? One last chance for a prophetic word, if you will, to say,
Yeah,
listen, I want to speak this over your life. I probably won't see you again till you're in your late 20s or early 30s, but
right.
maybe this might sustain you for a little while, this word, right? Another thing, I'll just go back to ritual for my kids was with my boys. I got two boys and a girl. And my boys, it was back when you could go to midnight movies.
Yeah.
We would never, for God forbid, we should go see a movie on a Saturday. No, 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 because by then everybody's talking about it. So I would wake my boys up at 11 p.m. and say, "All right, midnight movie," especially during the Marvel era. So we would take
Right.
them. So we have a rich history, and now we can't. That's all we talk about is movies. We talk about movies anytime there's a conversation. There's movies. So just to double down, triple down on ritual things that you do with your family, they'll be remembered, they will be revered. It'll be just a long lasting thing, and you can find more ideas in the book, by the way, which there'll be a link
Mm,
down below.
yeah.
Now, I want to start sending people to your website, which is dadacademy.info. And over there, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but you have something called the Dad Plan, right?
Yeah.
And
So
what is the Dad Plan?
the dad plan is having a dad that actually starts putting these things together. We go through the values identification. You actually make a list of both, I call it experiential skills and emotional intelligence that you're going to pass on to your kids. Um, for instance, you'd think that maybe managing money is an experiential skill, but really it's a relational skill, right? Because of how much finances affect your relationships down the
Yep.
road as a man. Um, you start making a list of people that you want to invite into your children's lives as mentors. One of the things you and I understand as youth leaders and as pastors is that parents don't really understand that there comes a certain point in time when you're not parenting on your own, that there are other voices that are speaking into the lives of your kids. And what you want to do is to find voices that align their values and their priorities with yours. And so there are specific people that I have invited to have access into my young adults' lives, and those relationships continue on to this day. Another part of your dad plan is just looking at your calendar. Like, the birthdays are coming up, the anniversaries are coming up, the graduations are coming up, the special events are coming up. And you need to put that on your calendar of how you're going to be invested and turn that opportunity into a memorable moment, with also the idea of making time to vacation. Uh, I was a youth pastor. In fact, I've never been one of these mega church leaders, and it's not like money has never been a challenge for us. But there came a point in time that I realized that um, w if the Sabbath is really important to recreate, right? Recreate, not just we need to make space to vacate our everyday lives for something new and fresh to happen in us. So part of your dad plan is you got to plan a vacation that year. Um, and at the end of it, you start thinking about the rituals and traditions, the rites of passage that are coming up. And at the end of this, you actually have like a business plan for being a dad for the next year. And the cool part about it, I think, is that just as your businesses change over the time, every year you need to reevaluate your business plan. What are the new opportunities? What are the new challenges? every year you can redo your dad plan because every year your kids are going through a different stage and there are new things that you want to do this year. So it's not just a one and done. It's the best when you start to relive it over and over again. And in the book, it actually walks you through step by step developing your own dad plan. And actually there's some pretty exciting things on the horizon when it comes to the dad plan, and our website. We're not quite ready to roll that out yet. We're still about 6 months out in development, but to really help guys take super practical steps, even online, to be a part of that.
Well, we're excited for any news that'll come out on that front, and of course, like I said, you can go to dadacademy.info to keep up with that because I'm sure that whatever you announce will be appearing on there, and there's other great resources on the website as well. And as we begin to land the plane here, I know there are some guys, some youth pastors, who are fathers that are listening. What advice would you give them about this whole thing of ministry life, family life? Just something because, and I can only speak, like I said, from my experience, that it can be a complication. And maybe that's the best way to put it, where you feel the tug of ministry, and of course you feel the tug of family. How can you just speak some life into some youth pastors that are listening right now and help them, give them some words of wisdom?
Yeah, if I could really encourage you with something, the world system, and it even creeps into the church because of our own human nature, is that we live in a perform for love culture, that your value and your worth is based on your production. And and there are some realities on which we need to be evaluated and whether or not we're giving our attention to the things for which we're being compensated for, which we feel called to. But remember, I always got to go back to Jesus at his baptism, that when he emerged from the waters, there was a voice from heaven said, this is the Jeff Greek uh, paraphrase, this is my being loved son in whom I'm well pleased. And if we don't find our validation and our sense of living in God's favor from our Heavenly Father, then we will always succumb to the external pressure of trying to please people, which after you've lived in a period of time, especially in ministry, we find that there's no way to make everybody happy all the time. And when you get to heaven, he's not going to ask you about the 30 kids, the 3 kids, the 300 kids that were under your pastoral supervision. He's going to ask you about the people that he committed to you and your spouse and in your children. And when I stand before the Lord, he already knows how big my church is or isn't. He already knows the influence that my ministry efforts have accomplished and the fruit that they've produced. What I want to be able to do is stand before him and him call me faithful because I have loved my wife well and I've supported my kids well. That maybe one day I have the privilege of being a awesome grandpa because I'm already a unbelievable funkle to my nephews and nieces. Like I call my nephews and nieces every week, and they're adults now, and they look forward to it. And because I want them to know that somebody even outside their mom and dad are in their corner. I've had people that I've given my life to, um, who have never said thank you. In fact, they've actually kind of, you feel taken advantage of if you're living for their approval.
Right.
And so find the right boundaries. And some of you, if I'm going to be real honest here, sometimes we're serving souls, right? Uh,
Yep.
sometimes we're not as quite developed as we think that we are. So stay humble, stay teachable, but keep the number one thing the number one thing. Keep loving the Lord first. Keep loving your family second. And I promise you, there will be enough overflow to do what he's asked you to do, what he's asked you to do.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. I like to tell youth pastors always give your best to the people who are going to be at your funeral.
Oh,
There. give,
Absolutely.
give your best to those folks because they're the ones that are going to be there,
Yeah.
for you and those things. So, but tell us a little bit more. I know there's some resources over on your website. I know you got a checklist over there. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other resources you have?
Yeah, we have like this free little download called the Three Responsibilities of a Father that kind of gives a dad a 30,000 foot view of what being a dad is and some practical steps that you can take to make sure that you're moving along that purpose. We've got the Milestone Moments planner that's going to be available. It's a step by step, literally a step by step rites of passage planner, right? Which is how to help your kids, developing little special ceremonies to help your kids know when they move from one stage to another with new privileges and new responsibilities. I really believe in those kind of moments. Some of them we don't even have to create. Some of them are just natural in a life, right? How do we make getting your driver's license even more important, right? Than just getting
Yeah.
your license. There's some things that are related to that. Obviously, we can have access to the workshop. But most importantly, we're excited about this new resource of the book that will be coming out. And as you go to dadacademy.info, there'll be some links on where you'll be able to get that. But man, my favorite stuff is the stuff we're doing on social media. And if you would follow Dad Academy on Instagram, it's dad.academy. On TikTok, it's Dad Academy. On Facebook, it's Dad Academy. On Twitter, it's Dad Academy. And then on YouTube, as we're starting to do some more videos like this, with Paul's permission, we'll post this up again on Dad Academy Online. So youtube.com/Dad Academy Online. And we just want to be a resource and encouragement to dad and to men. And the vision is that we would really build communities of fathering. Because in Malachi chapter 4, it says, the thing to really look for the coming of the kingdom. So I'm going to start turning the hearts of the fathers to the children, the hearts of the children to the fathers. And the last line of the Old Testament is pretty haunting. The last line says, or else I will strike the land with a curse. We can feel that curse starting to creep in, and we need dads and men to begin to start to shift that by giving attention to the partnership that we have with our Heavenly Father in getting to father those that He's entrusted to our care.
That's right. And in football terms, you want to stiff arm the curse. And what
Let's
and
go.
a good way to stiff arm that curse is to get this book. Start reading
Oh,
Dad
thanks,
Academy,
Paul.
coming out on May 27th. It's Dad Academy, Raising Courageous, Capable, Confident Kids. All the links will be down below. Go and pre purchase the book, get all the news, get all the things, go to the website, all that stuff. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for blessing all the people that are listening, watching today, and blessing these dads and speaking life and confidence into them.
Oh, Paul, it's a great honor. And one last little plug, like I would love if you've got a church in the area or a group of churches that kind of want to do Dad Academy live, if I can come and resource that, I would really, my schedule is available to be able to do those types of things. And if you want some ministry coaching and some encouragement, just like what Paul offers, man, feel free to reach out, man. We want people to be equipped and encouraged. And man, Paul, thank you. Thank you for reading the material. Thanks for this amazing opportunity. And we just share a blessing to all the people who are not only serving the next generation, but the eternal deposit that you're making into the kingdom.
There you go. Well said, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.